Okay, let's do a quick review of multiplying and dividing fractions. It's pretty simple, so we don't need to take too long doing it. Let's start with this problem. Let's do 3/8 times 4/10. Now when we're multiplying fractions, unlike adding and subtracting fractions where we have to make sure that our denominators are the same, with multiplying it's super nice and easy because we don't have to make sure these are the same. We can multiply fractions that are completely different with no issues. So let's just do this one. When we multiply a fraction, we just multiply straight across. So we do 3 times 4, which equals 12, and that's our top number. And then our denominator is determined by 8 times 10, which would be 80 in this case. So after we've done our multiplication, our answer is 12/80ths, but this is a pretty big denominator. It would be nice to see if we could get this a little bit simpler. So we look and we see if we can divide either of these by the same number. Well, in this case, we can divide both 12 and 80 by 2. So let's do that. 12 divided by 2 equals 6, and 80 divided by 2 equals 40. Now as you can see, we can actually still divide this down further because both 6 and 40 are both divided by 2. So let's divide it again. We're going to divide by 2 over 2. Remember, when you would divide both things by 2, we're not changing the value of the fraction, we're just changing the cosmetic look of it. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. And 40 divided by 2 is 20. Well, we can't divide 3 and 20 by anything equal, so that is our final answer, 3/20ths. You can just leave the answer as 12/80ths, but it's sometimes nice to have a bit smaller and more manageable, and so that's why we simplify the fraction like this. Okay, when you're multiplying a fraction, let's say this one had been a negative 3/8 times 4/10. Now, just remembering our rule of negatives, if we have a negative and a positive multiplied together, that means that the answer is going to be negative, and so our final answer would have been negative 3/20ths. Pretty simple. Okay, now dividing fractions. So let's say that the problem had looked like this instead. So that it was 3/8 divided by 4/10. What do we do in this case? Well, we can't totally just divide straight across like we had before, mostly because division is just a little bit special. So what we do when we're doing fraction division is that we take the first number, and it stays the same as we rewrite our equation, and we divide this fraction by the reciprocal, or the inverse of our first number. So in this case, we would multiply this by 10/4. We basically reversed the fraction, and by reversing the fraction made it so we can multiply instead of having to divide these numbers, which makes our life way easier. So we can do 3 times 10 is 30, and we can do 8 times 4, which is 32, and then we can simplify. 30 divided by 2 over 2 is 15. 32 divided by 2 over 2 is 16, so our answer is 15/16. Now you might be like, okay, why can we do this reciprocal funky dunky thingy? Let me show you. Let's say that we had a problem that we had written, and it was 3/8, and we wrote division this way instead. Divided by, that's our division line, by 4/10. Well, this is pretty nasty to look at. And we don't really want to have to deal with 1, 2, 3 division lines that you get when you're dividing fractions. So we remember that we can do a little bit of fancy footwork math. And in this case, we want to make it so that we can get rid of this bottom half of this ginormous fraction. And we can do that by multiplying both the top and bottom by a number that's going to make 4/10 just vanish. I'll show you. 4/10 times 10/4. It's just the reciprocal or the reverse of our original fraction, but let's see what it does. If we do 4/10 times 10/4, we do 4 times 10, which equals 40, and 10 times 4, which equals 40, and when you have 40 over 40, 40 divided by 40 equals 1 whole. So when you multiply or divide anything by 1, it doesn't change the value of the number, it just changes how it looks cosmetically. Well, if we were to rewrite this with this new fancy dancy footwork, we would say that we had 3/8 Now whatever we do on the top bottom, we have to do on the top. So we would also have to multiply this one times 10/4 in order to keep the value of the number the same. So we have 3/8 times 10/4. That's supposed to be a 4. All divided by 1. Well, anything divided by 1 is just itself, so we can essentially pretend that this part of the equation no longer exists. And we know how to solve this one because it's just 3/8 times 10/4. And once again, that's 30 over 32, which also equals 15 over 16. And so that's why we can do this reciprocal math. So whenever you are dividing a fraction, remember that you are going to multiply the first fraction by the reciprocal or the inverse of the original fraction. Or you can write it out in this longer way if that makes more sense to your brain, and show the actual steps that show why we can do this when we're dividing fractions. And then just multiplying fractions, we just multiply across, so 3 times 4 and 8 times 10, and then simplify as far as we can. Alright, that's everything for this video. I'll see you in the next one.